All right, Module 3. So this week we are looking at African American history, much of which was left out, revised. There have been so many efforts. The practice of slavery was so horrific and so evil and wrong that as history was written, it was almost as though there was an agenda to write it out. I don't know if there was an active agenda. I don't know if it's, when I study history, I like to read and write the things that make me feel good. Things that are hard, I ignore them because it's hard. And I have to consciously force myself to not do that because it's so important. In some regard, it's even more important to read the really hard stuff, the truth, because that is the only way that we get the characteristics that when those things come around again, history repeats. And the reason it repeats is because of people like me, right? I want the stuff that feels good. I want the stuff that agrees with me. I don't want to read about man's inhumanity to man. It's haunting. It's horrifying. But when we ignore that, when we seek to rewrite that, then we do not learn the lessons of that. We don't know the characteristics. And so when these movements, these horrors of history start recycling, they get recycled because we don't know enough about the last time to prevent it. We don't know we're in the midst of it until we're already up to our, as my dad would say, up to our eyeballs and alligators with it. So we have to study the hard parts, and we cannot leave narratives out, which you all, I graded your discussions, or no, your assignments for Module 1, and you were all really up to speed. And I saw that in the discussions for Module 2. We have to have a complete narrative. And when we pick and choose and we leave parts out, we will never have a complete narrative. And that's what causes history to repeat. So it's really important. So that's what we're looking at today. So also we are going to learn to identify milestones that characterize the historical progression of an issue. So one thing that I thought about, we have the Civil War. Then we have the Civil War amendments. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery nationwide. We needed that because the Emancipation Proclamation only abolished slavery in the rebel states. But slavery was alive and well all over the country, sadly. So we had to have the 13th Amendment to abolish it nationwide. Then we have the 14th Amendment. Very important. Equal protection under the law. The 15th Amendment, you can vote as long as you're a man. But now you have the 19th Amendment, so women are still left out. You can vote as long as you're a man and of any race. No longer do we have the racial discrimination in voting. However, in the South, especially, we see these Jim Crow laws, things like literacy tests, poll taxes, things that were designed to prevent African American men from voting. So then, and we like to confine our blame of that to the South. However, the Supreme Court, the branch of the government charged with interpreting the law, in other words, telling us what the law means, they, in the Plessy versus Ferguson case in 1896, I think, they created the separate but equal doctrine, which codified nationally segregation. They said separate but equal, which we all know separate is not equal. Separate for a reason. If it was equal, it would need to be separate, right? So that is the law until Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s, when we see the separate but equal overturned and reversed. And then, but even still, things were not, we really didn't get as much traction as we needed until the 1960s with the 1964 Civil Rights Act And then 1965, Voting Rights Act. Then we start to get some traction. Then we start moving toward equality. So that's just, hundreds of years of progression of an issue. So things move slowly sometimes, and painfully slowly. So we're looking at that. We continue to see certain events that are left out of history, and it's our job as historians to find them and to tell about them so that they never are repeated again. We can stop the cycle of history repeating. All right, so this week you're reading the Module 3 guide, the Module 3 resources, and then you have a discussion. I think every module in this class has a discussion, so be ready for those. Remember to reply to 2 of your classmates. Discussions heavily rely on discussing, and if you go and post your initial post, that's awesome, but you don't contribute as much as you could to the learning experience overall unless you do your replies. So make sure you have your replies, and then you have a resource investigation assignment. So have a great week of learning, and I will see you in the discussion board.